Not long ago, we showed you a video of Donald Trump being asked a question about climate change, and he responded saying that clean air and clean water are a very important part of climate change. He's a guy that doesn't know and isn't going to learn what the actual concerns are. But there are politicians who get it and who have gotten it for a very long time. And so I wanna show you two pieces of video from way back in 1991, decades before my co-host Emma was even born, showing that some people not only got the threat of climate change, but understood what the solution should be, effectively understood what the Green New Deal would be back in the early 90s. Here is Bernie Sanders back in 1991.
The truth of the matter is, I think, that unless we move radically and boldly, as you indicate, we may lose the planet for our grandchildren. Interestingly enough, I think, and I say this not because I want it to be that way, but I think it is that way, you're not going to deal effectively with the environmental crisis unless you deal with the economic crisis at the same time. They're the same issues. And a lot of people who are, environmental, boy, this factory is polluting, close it down. But what happens to the workers who are going out on the street? Not my concern, I'm concerned about the environment. This farmer is using a pesticide, close it down. But what happens to, what we have got to do is to understand the challenge, the real challenge is how do you have a social system and an economy which does at least two things. Number one, it provides decently for its people at the same time as it does not destroy the environment. That's what you've got to do. That's why national health care is an environmental issue, because that takes an enormous burden off the backs of working people. So the argument is either we have, and how many cities in America are faced with this dilemma? Mayors, are faced with this dilemma. Here you have a factory which is polluting, it's poisoning its own workers, and the option is either you throw those workers out on the street or you save the environment. That is not a choice that we should have to make in 1991. If the choice is either jobs or the environment, that is no choice at all.
What are your thoughts?
Wow, well, he's making the case basically for a Green New Deal, intersectionality of both working class concerns and environmental concerns, where you can just basically create green jobs and ensure that the economy is still sustainable, and that the way that we produce waste and our systems are sustainable for the environment. So it's fascinating. He says in 1991 we shouldn't have to make that choice. Bro, we're still making that choice tenfold, a millionfold today, unfortunately.
Yeah, oh God, what if you had been able to go up to him at the time, just whisper in his ear, in 2019, the president isn't gonna believe that climate change is real.
Yeah, I know.
He would have lost it. So before I get to complimenting him, which I wanna do, the Green New Deal is the Green New Deal, obviously, to reference the New Deal. Everybody gets that. There have been a lot of policies, though, over the past few decades that have had the New Deal label applied to them in an effort to get people to support it. But there has never been a more appropriately named policy, I think, than the Green New Deal. Because in the same way that the New Deal was a foundation with many different arms or tentacles and many different policies, but had a core philosophical framework, the Green New Deal does too, and it is on firm scientific grounds, firm ideological grounds. It just makes sense, and I think that we are still in early days for people understanding it. Like he was trying to explain it back in 1991. I would say that if you talked to me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have spoken about climate change in a way that directly tied it to things like economic justice, criminal justice, healthcare, those sorts of things. But I think that people like Bernie Sanders, who is still doing it, people like AOC, activists, behind the Sunrise Movement, Greta, all of that, the way that they talk about this issue, I think is going to fundamentally change not only the way that our government, our politicians deal with climate change, but virtually every other policy area.
And it's a failing just of humans in general that we're siloing all of these these policy issues into concrete boxes, right? So that we can't talk about them as if they don't affect all of the others. So environmental racism is an issue where people of lower incomes, usually brown or black people, are disproportionately affected by the effects of climate change. And now that's two different, policy topics that are intertwined, but that's how things work. Everything is interconnected, and we have some sort of problem with mainstream politicians. Mainstream politicians have this problem of like being unable to connect those. Bernie Sanders certainly does not have that issue and hasn't had that issue since the 1990s and pre.
Yeah. So by the way, I went and I wanted to find some other examples of Bernie Sanders from early on, and I came across this C-SPAN video from 1991 of, it was the annual congressional dinner, but it seemed very roasty, the section that I read. Bernie Sanders was up on like the podium side or whatever, and there was someone who spoke about him, and they seemed, I mean, he was pretty new at that point. They seemed very dismissive of Bernie Sanders. That would be consistent for decades.
Yes.
But anyway, he got up, and you should understand, the person who spoke before him made a joke about whether he would give up his parking spot or something. I don't understand. I was like a little kid at that point. I don't know what that was referenced to, but he gets up. He is not being brought up to talk about climate change or anything like that. So just bear that in mind as you watch this video again from 1991.
When the United States Congress begins the process of breaking our dependency on the automobile, when we put billions of dollars into public transportation rather than to highways and roads, when we mandate that automobiles get 60 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, all right. Yes, that's real research and development. 60 miles per gallon. When we have pollution-free transportation, when that happens, I am prepared unequivocally to say before you, I will give up my space. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, for those comments. I always think it's so weird. It's just
Rep Bernard.
Yeah, C-SPAN videos and Nina Turner call him Bernard.
Yeah,
that's about it. But anyway, yeah, and again, he was not brought up to talk about any of that stuff. The guy that you saw first in the video laughing, the guy who looks like that documentarian but isn't, had just been joking about him, and he got up and he decided, no, I'm gonna talk about infrastructure. I'm gonna talk about the way we produce and consume energy. Even right there, as a response to a roast, he tied together multiple different issue areas.
He has one mode. I mean, he's unable to snap out of it, and that's what makes him so special. And like even, we have other politicians who will like have fun, like AOC will do Jesus and Moro or whatever, or she'll hang out with Chrissy Teigen. But
did she?
I
didn't see that.
I actually saw that on a Jesus and Moro with Anna Kendrick. She had like this amazing dinner with like all of these very, very fancy people, including them, John Legend and Chrissy Teigen. I know. You should have gone with like Groucho glasses and been a waiter just so you could have been involved. Hey, would you like some filet mignon?
I love that even in the fantasy version of this, I'm at best serving them.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not invited.
I mean, come on.
It wasn't like Groucho glasses so that I could sit at the table or anything.
No,
yes.
no.
Thank you.
You're actually on your knees getting whipped cream poured into your mouth.
That's a Yang thing, okay?
Yang thing.
Anyway.
But yeah, no, even her, like she can have fun in those instances. Sorry for that imagery. But Bernie is just like, nope, this is all I can talk about because he's obsessive in the best way. He's obsessed with making society more equitable.
Yeah, and I know that we're in this Democratic primary and this is beating a dead horse, but the people who say, stop saying that these politicians, this one person has been right for literally decades. It doesn't matter. If you got to it a month ago, it's just as good. It's not, it's really not. Someone who got it, literally, like he is opposed to the 1%, and yet he was obviously in the top 1% for understanding and communicating about this issue. There are others now, but he was out there earlier than anyone else, better than anyone else, and that does actually matter, especially when you're talking about literally the most important issue facing our species and our civilization. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.